My name is Bill Morrison. You probably knew that. This wouldn't be here unless you figured just title. I know this is billed as a workshop, and the room is set up that way. I wouldn't call this so much a workshop in that I'm not really giving you assignments, but I will be giving you a tutorial in character design. So while I'm doing that, if you want to sketch along and work on some character designs as I'm kind of showing you some things, I think that's great. The first thing I'm going to do is kind of give you a little overview of my career, and that's why I'm sure you've all been wondering, what am I in the right place? What is this picture up on the screen? I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and I went to the what was at the time the college, the Center for Creative Studies. It's now the College for Creative Studies. I'm now a teacher there, so that was my alma mater. I went there for 4 years, and I wanted to be a comic book artist. And I ended up getting out of school, and the only work I could get was as a technical illustrator. And so this is one of the pieces I did, one of the first things I did out of college. So this is a cutaway illustration of a diesel fuel pump. Now, needless to say, this is not what I wanted to do for a career, but it sort of, you'll find out well, first of all, how many of you are artists or aspiring to be artists? Okay. So one thing you'll find out is if you go to art school, when you get out, you're not going to immediately necessarily get to do the stuff that you want to do. Don't be discouraged by that. Some of you will. Some of you will get out of art school and you'll land your first job, and it might be your dream job. But I would say the majority of you probably won't. But that's okay. That's normal. So if you get out of school and the only work you can get is painting cutaway section views of diesel fuel pumps, just do that and keep working on your portfolio while you're doing it. This is a piece that I did. I decided I moved out to Hollywood, and I got a job doing movie poster art. But I was doing, I was young, so I was doing kind of low budget horror movies and teen comedies and things like that. So in my spare time, I worked on my portfolio further, and I started doing portfolio pieces. So this was the piece that I did with Artie Woodward. This was the first movie poster that I ever painted. And this is probably the most well-known of the early horror movie posters. Anybody recognize this image? It's from a movie. Well, you can see it's the movie House, which was. I'm going to sit down so you can all see around me. This poster art got a lot of attention, and it led to some more work. And eventually, I worked for a studio that we landed the Disney account. So we worked for Disney feature film. And back when I was doing this, now everything, like all the classics, they get re-released onto video like every 10 years, and then they go into the vault and retire them for a while. You probably know that. And then they bring them out again for a fresh, younger audience to experience for the first time. Back then, they would re-release the films into theaters. So all the classic stuff from the 40s all the way up through the 70s and even the early 80s, they would bring it back around and put it in the theaters, and they would need a new poster. So I was doing posters for many of the classic Disney films, but then also new ones. So this is the art that I did for the first Little Mermaid movie poster. And I did some more classics. I got to do Bambi, Lady and the Tramp. This was another first. This was the first poster for Oliver and Company. Man, Jungle Book. And this was another new one. It was a featurette, Prince and the Pauper featuring Mickey Mouse, Donald, Goofy, and Pluto. And this was for the Roger Rabbit short, Roller Coaster Rabbit. So this was another new one. I started getting work outside of Disney. So this was the original poster for The Land Before Time. And because I started my career not doing animated characters, but doing more photorealistic art, I did this image for the Rocketeer movie. I don't think they ever used this, so it probably sits in the Disney vault to this day, but this was originally intended for the Rocketeer movie. And then along came The Simpsons, and my career took a big shift. So when I was at that first job where I was doing the horror movie posters, I met Matt Groening, who created The Simpsons, but at that time he had not yet created The Simpsons, so he was kind of a struggling cartoonist. But when The Simpsons came along, he remembered me and he recruited me to start doing artwork for that show. And I did all kinds of things. I did advertising, TV guide ads, comic books, book art, merchandise art. This was a limited edition print. So here's the original painting. And then this is how the print came out. It's based on like the 1950s sci-fi movie style movie poster. Publicity images for things like TV Guide. This is the first comic strip. So I did the first Simpsons comic strip. And like I mentioned, when I was in school, I wanted to do comic book arts. That's where my dreams were. And then everything kind of veered in a different direction. But through The Simpsons, I finally got to realize that dream and become a comic artist. So this appeared in the Simpsons Illustrated magazine. And that led to the first Simpsons comic book. And this is a photo from a signing that we did. I think this was the very first signing. And there's Matt Groening. And I'm in the background in the blue. The big guy. Steve Vance is in there. Steve was the editor and writer. And this was the very first, we started Bongo Comics. So this was the first, not the first Simpsons comic, but the first issue of Simpsons Comics under that title. And then we had a whole line. We had Bartman, we had Radioactive Man. We eventually did a Bart Simpson title. And this is just a quick gallery of some of the comic images that I did over the years. One of the favorite books that we did every year was the Treehouse of Horror, based on the Halloween episodes of the show. But we used to invite guest artists and writers. So this issue we had rock stars Gene Simmons from Kiss and Alice Cooper and Rob Zombie and Pat Boone, who used to be a rock and roller back in the 50s. And this just kind of shows the process a little bit. This is an original cover sketch. And a final painting. And just some more stuff. Okay, now we're starting to get into character design. Through Bongo Comics, I was given the opportunity to create my own comic book. So one of the things that Matt Groening set up for us as creators was he said, if any of you have an idea for a comic book that would kind of fit with the other comics that we're doing at Bongo, which is mostly humor comics, pitch it to me. And if it looks like something that sort of fits with what we're doing, then we'll do it. And it took me a little while, but I came up with this guy. His name is Roswell. And I did a comic called Roswell, Little Green Man. And this was the very first appearance. And I did that for a number of years at Bongo until Futurama came along. And then I had to shift my energies towards that. So I left Roswell behind. And I started working on character designs for the Futurama TV show. And so this was in this is like in the visual development stage. So if you've how many of you have heard the term viz dev? Okay, so short for visual development. And because I was already working for Matt Groening, he recruited me to like come over to his office or to his studio after hours and on weekends and sort of help him visualize the cast of characters that he was thinking of for Futurama. So this is before it was even pitched as a show. So this is an early design for Fry. And that's an early Bender, obviously. Bender was originally supposed to be just the galley cook for the Planet Express ship. And so I would get these cues from Matt. He would just write maybe a sentence or two about a character, and he would say, Bender is a robot, and he's the cook for the Planet Express ship. And so then I would just do what I thought that might look like. And then I would throw it to him, and then he would look at it and say, well, I wasn't really thinking that, but I like this one thing. And then he gave me riff off of that. I think this one was based on a drawing that Matt did of just Bender's head. And so I took that head drawing, and then I gave it a body and added all the details of the apron and the spatula and all that. Gave it props. This is another Bender who's dressed like the Simpson for some reason. I don't know why he has Mickey Mouse gloves. Don't really remember, but basically you're just trying everything. You don't know what these characters are going to end up looking like, so you just do drawing after drawing after drawing to try to figure out, to see what lands. To show the producer or the creator what these characters might look like. So Leela was described to me as a Cyclops alien who knew martial arts. She was a martial artist. So I gave her like a kind of a kimono, and I did a whole ton of drawings of Leela. And one I remember she had fangs and a tail, and there's one where her fingers are just like two long fingers instead of a hand, like kind of tentacles. This is before Leela was a mutant. If you know Futurama, you know Leela was a mutant. Back in the early days, before they had that figured out, before the writers settled on that, Matt was thinking of her as an alien. So we continued. While I was actually recruited to be the art director on the show once the show was sold and we started working on the pilot, but I was still working on the comics at Bongo, so it was obviously a natural to come up with a Futurama comic. So this is the first issue of that. This came out, I think, about a year after the show. So we already knew what the show was going to be, and the stories were designed to kind of fit into the continuity of the show. So these are just some of my favorite covers from the series. And eventually we pitched a crossover between the Simpsons and Futurama. And it was actually done before they did it on TV. So we were pioneers in that. We did the first Simpsons Futurama crossover. And I'm going to go through some of this stuff very quickly. I did a Beatles graphic novel based on the Yellow Submarine animated film. Which, by the way, if you're into character design, some of the most innovative designs that you're ever going to see. Not only with the Beatles characters, but all throughout the film. There's monsters, there's all kinds of creatures and characters that are just brilliant and incredibly well designed and bizarre. I'm also a pop art painter, so these are some of the paintings that I've done of rock stars, pop stars. And more recently, I got back into Disney, so I started doing artwork for their fine art program. So these are like prints that we sell in galleries. This is just some of the process art. So you can see prelims, morphing into final inks, and then final color. So showing you all of this, just more for inspiration than anything else. So as young artists, you're going to probably start your career doing a lot of stuff that makes you think, why am I doing this? This is not my passion. This is not what I want to do. but eventually you'll find your way and you'll do the kind of stuff that you really want to do. This is just another graphic novel that I came up with. It's a very kind of horror noir kind of thing. This was a poster for a two-part Simpsons episode that aired a couple of years ago for the first time. And any of you know Stray Dogs comic book? If you don't know it, check it out. It's really good. But I did a cover for that. Rocketeer again was the souvenir book for San Diego Comic-Con back in 2022. And then if any of you watch MeTV, this is one of my most recent projects, doing poster art for Spenguli, who's the Saturday night horror host. Okay, so that's that. That's my career in a nutshell. Now I want to show you all about character design. So I mentioned the College for Creative Studies. In 2019, I moved from Los Angeles back to Detroit, and I started teaching at my alma mater. So I'm now teaching character and environment design at the College for Creative Studies, and I'm also teaching story concept and senior studio. So I'm really enjoying working with young artists, working with young writers, and helping them to develop really classic, well-designed characters. So starting with this, there's basically three different situations as a character designer that you might find yourself in. The first is pitching your own show. So you come up, do all the visual development yourself, and it's all in your style, and you pitch that to Disney or to a studio that might be looking for animated properties that they can develop and then pitch to networks. And it's your show. You're the showrunner, you're the designer, it's all in your style. That's the Matt Groening model. So when Matt Groening pitched The Simpsons, he did the early character designs, he pitched it to Fox, and they bought it. So the second model is working on an existing show, and that's probably going to be the most common. So you'll sign on to an existing show, and then when you design characters, new characters for that show, which pretty much every episode is going to have new characters introduced, whether they're throwaway characters that only appear once, or they might end up becoming long-term characters. A good example is Comic Book Guy on The Simpsons. He was only supposed to be in one episode. So they didn't put a lot of work into the character design. The artist who designed Comic Book Guy probably just took a couple of stabs at what he may look like, showed it to Matt Groening and the other producers. They settled on one design. Boom, he's in the show. Because nobody ever thought he was ever going to come back again. Well, sometimes things happen, especially with the voice actors. And you're going to probably meet a lot of voice actors, animation voice actors this weekend. So sometimes the voice actors add a certain level of a certain something to a character. And the writers also add things. So something might happen in the dialogue, and the way the voice actor delivers that dialogue that makes the writers go, oh wow, that was really great. We got to bring that character back. And then the character becomes a mainstay. So you might find yourself in that kind of a situation where you're just designing characters on the fly. And like I said, usually the idea is that they're not necessarily going to come back, but sometimes they do. So, it better be a good design, even though it's something that you may only take one or two stabs at. So that's the second model. The third is, like I mentioned when I was working for Matt on Futurama before he pitched the show, there was a long process of visual development for that because he didn't really have a deadline. He knew he had a show in mind, and he knew he was going to end up pitching it to Fox. If Fox didn't like it, he was going to pitch it elsewhere. But he kind of had the luxury of time. So we spent months just doing different designs for these characters. I did the same thing on Disenchantment, where I spent months and months just doing multiple hundreds of drawings of what Elfo and Princess Bean would look like. And Lucy was pretty much set. Matt did one drawing of Lucy, and we never explored any options beyond that. That it really became just the look that he wanted. But Elfo, he wasn't sure. Matt thought, he had a drawing of Elfo, but he thought maybe it should be Disney style, since we're doing like a fairy tale. Maybe it should look more like Hanna-Barbera or UPA, like the classic UPA style from the 1950s. So he was really open to exploration in a lot of different areas. So we spent a long time just doing, like I said, multiple hundreds of drawings of what these characters might look like. Ultimately, Matt went back to his original designs on these characters. So what you see on Disenchantment, those, like, of the original cast, those are all Matt Groening. But he going in, he didn't have the confidence to say, yes, this is how I want the show to look. He wanted that visual exploration before he could make that decision. So you might say all of that work was for nothing, but I don't look at it that way. I look at it as all of those drawings were to show Matt what he really knew all along, which was that his original vision was the right one. Did you have a question?
I was asking, is that why there's so many background extras in Disenchantment? I love that show, by the way, but I just noticed that there's lots of crowd shots, there's lots of background characters in different places with there's the steampunk land, there's
all the different lands.
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering, were those a number of character designs that didn't become the main cast, but just kind of became background extras? Or?
Yeah, well, what happens is once the pilot's done, the studio, which was Rough Draft, they employed Rough Draft, who did it still does the animation for Futurama. And so they have a team of designers. And those designers go through the script, and the director assigns the different characters that are new, that haven't been designed yet, to the character design team. And everybody divvies up the work, and they come up with different things. But sometimes it'll just say crowd shot, or, like they're in a town square, and the director knows that the town square can't be empty at high noon on a Tuesday.
Right.
So the animators know, okay, we got to come up with a lot of extras to use like a live action movie term or TV term.
Yeah.
But we got to come up with extras. So they're all just done generally in the same style as the main characters. But usually the main characters, and we'll get into this in a minute, the main characters are usually more distinctive because you want them to stand out. You want the background characters to be a little more generic and a little more bland, and you don't want them to compete with the main characters. Okay, so these are the three models. And so just know that going in. And now we're going to talk about some of the tenets of good character design. And one of them that's, to me, one of the most important things is clarity. So you want clarity of silhouette, clarity of palette, and clarity or exaggeration, or you might also use the term caricature. So here's examples of three of those. There are three examples of each one of those things. So here you see the silhouette of a character at the upper right, and then you see the palette, and then you see the character in the bottom, exaggeration. Now, these are all not great examples of character design or of clarity in character design, because if you look at the silhouette in the upper right, there's so much going on with the silhouette. It's a little hard to tell what all those things sticking out from the body. You can tell it's basically a humanoid figure, but it's hard to tell what those things really are that are coming off the bottom. Similarly in the palette's kind of all over the place. And then exaggeration, even though that's a good character design in the bottom, there's not a lot of exaggeration going on. It's pretty true to life. which again, that's not necessarily a bad thing if you're doing a very realistic looking show or a film. Now here we have examples of things that have a little more clarity. If you look at the first one, obviously everyone knows that silhouette. You know who that is immediately just by looking at the silhouette. And that's what you really want. I remember the first time Matt Groening told me that when I was designing characters for Roswell. He said, make sure that if you just blacked in with a Sharpie the drawing that you have of your character, would people be able to recognize the character or know what type of character it is? So you can see from that silhouette, even if you've never seen Homer before, you can tell he's kind of a middle-aged, dumpy guy. You know, he's probably a father. But, you know, there's a lot of information being given to you just from that silhouette. And that's what you want in a character design. You want characters who tell the audience multiple things before that character even opens their mouth, before they make a move, before they even say anything. You want that design and even that silhouette to say something about that character. Same thing with the palette. The palette's very simple and basic, and it becomes iconic. You look at that palette and you immediately know that's Homer Simpson just from those rectangular swatches. There's no doubt about it. And then exaggeration, taking something from real life and then caricaturing, giving it an exaggerated presentation. So obviously what we've just been talking about here, you can see fully formed Homer Simpson. His design is so classic and so memorable, but it's because of those three things. Now here's some examples of how that works. So I'm going to show you a whole bunch of images, and they're all recognizable as Homer Simpson, even though they're done in different styles. They're done beyond the style of the TV show, but they're all recognizable as Homer. So you can see here, just putting that 5 o'clock shadow and the shape of the eyes and the hair, the very iconic 2 loops of hair on the top and the M-shaped hair on the side. Just putting that on a character from a completely different show, and you can tell that that character is morphed into Homer. This is John Crick-Falusi from Ren and Stimpy doing his version. I think this was the animator who did the Triplets of Belleville. This is it's kind of a very Disney-fied Jungle Book kind of version. It's Bill Clinton, who's done a couple of opening couch gags. So this is my favorite one, even this, which looks like it was drawn by a preschooler. You can tell it's Homer. Okay, so silhouette. First rule, the character must be recognizable from the silhouette alone. And here's some examples of that. And I want you to shout out who these characters are.
Mickey Mouse.
Mickey Mouse.
Sailor Moon.
Right, Sailor Moon. Yep.
Tribe.
Okay, see how that worked? Just from the silhouette, you were all able to recognize and identify those characters. So here's another tip. Reduce your character to a silhouette and check what shapes you can push to make it more iconic. So when you're designing a character, do an overlay and then just black it in with a Sharpie and then look at it, study it, and see, okay, what can I do to make this character more unique and more iconic? What can I push? Is there, does a character wear a hat? And can I maybe exaggerate that hat and make it unique, make it more iconic? Okay, So now exaggeration, which also I like to use the word caricature. If you look at characters in animation, they're all based on observational drawing. So whether they're famous people or whether they're animals or just some artists will just go to a coffee house and sit there and draw the people who are sitting around them, and they'll caricature them and do exaggerated drawings to create characters out of those people. Animators do it all the time. It's always fun to watch certain films. Like, how many of you have seen Iron Giant? Okay, one of my favorite films. Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston, the famous Disney animators, are in that film because Brad Bird was a student of and a fan of those guys, and he wanted to pay tribute to them by putting them in his film. But they're brilliant caricatures of those animators. You see that all the time. You'll see it in The Simpsons. You'll see like the writing staff will be in there. So always be looking around you for inspiration and for ways that you can create characters. So I think in all of these pictures I'm going to show you coming up, you can just see how the character designers were inspired by people from real life. This is my favorite one. Watch this. I'm going to show you that again. So look at his body. Look at the way his pants are up above his navel. Look at how broad his shoulders are. Look at the facial features and the hair. Very, very handsome, very fit, good-looking guy. But you look at this drawing, and you can see how far those elements were pushed to the point where it's grotesque, but it's still identifiable as the actor. You can still tell who that is. Okay, now this is a big one. We're going to talk about shape language. How many of you have heard that term, shape language? Okay. So the reason it's called shape language is because, like I mentioned earlier, when you design a character well, it speaks to the audience before that character even opens its mouth. So there's a language inherent in the shapes, in the silhouette, in all aspects of the character's design. There's a language there that's telling you something about that character. So here's some 3 basic shapes. We have a square, a triangle, and a circle. And now we have 3 characters who are based on those shapes. So you look at the first one, Wreck-It Ralph, who's very square in his design. You look at Batman, who's very angular. His whole shape is a triangle, but he's also got triangular shapes all throughout the design of his costume. And then you've got Jake, who's very round. And those shapes say things on an emotional level and on a psychological level to the audience that we don't even think about. So again, the 3 shapes. So again, the 3 shapes. Here's the first one, square. So look at the characters here who are based on a block or a cube or a square. They're all very steadfast characters. Sometimes you might say stubborn, unmovable. They're usually strong characters, and they're dependable. Now, not all of those characters have those traits, but those are the things that shape says about a character. So it can, if you see a character like Ralph, it can be telling you because of the shapes that are inherent in Ralph's design. It can be telling you things that, like, he's immovable, he's dependable, he's stubborn, he's steadfast. Same with all these other characters. Now we have the circle, which is very friendly and fun. And so you have a lot of characters that have the circle in their design, and they're approachable and they're friendly. You got Winnie the Pooh, and you've got Jake, and you've got, I forget the little mushroom character. And yeah, all these characters, Mickey Mouse. They're all characters that are generally friendly and approachable and fun. And that's why it's not an accident that they have circles in their designs. It's intentional because the animator wants the viewer, the audience, to feel that way about the character. And then here we have angular. So angular says dangerous. It says, it can say evil. Not necessarily evil, but sometimes it does. So like Batman, for example, Batman's not evil, but he is dangerous. And he's dark and he's scary. So a lot of angular design goes into, a lot of angular shapes go into his design, a lot of triangles. And then there's shape motif. So the shape motif is how you use those shapes in designing your character. So nothing is all one thing or another. Or I shouldn't say nothing is. Not everything is all one thing or another. So you do have characters that are a combination of shapes. And again, that's intentional because it says different things about their nature, about what the character designer wants the audience to think about things. But you want, again, we go back to clarity. You want clarity in the design. So this first drawing is kind of all over the place. You don't really know what to think about these characters because it's a combination of all these different shapes. But here, it's more clear. It's more homogeneous. You can tell more about the character from the way these shapes are put together and the shapes that are used. It's not confusing. So here's another rule, another big tip. Give the main characters, I mentioned this earlier, an attribute that no other character on the show has. And here's some examples. So you look at these silhouettes and you can see the things that are in color here are examples of things that no other character in those shows has in their design. And that helps you identify them. Like you could pick them out of a crowd, even if you don't see the character completely, you can pick them out because of that one thing. So Donald Duck. With Donald Duck, it's basically the sailor suit, but more particularly the hat. No other character has the sailor hat. So you can always tell in a world of ducks, you're watching DuckTales or looking at a Disney comic, a lot of the ducks have a similar look. But you can always tell Donald because he's got the sailor suit and specifically the hat. Homer. There was a rule very early on in The Simpsons that Matt Groening came up with that no other character on the show can have the beard, the 5 o'clock shadow that Homer has. Now, there are a couple of characters who have it, who got kind of grandfathered in, and Grandpa Simpson is one of them. Krusty is one. Lenny is another. And maybe Herb, who is Homer's brother, his half-brother. But early on in the show, Matt realized if we have too many characters that have that thing that makes Homer Homer, then it's going to be confusing. So from now on, if anybody designs a character that has that 5 o'clock shadow, it'll be rejected immediately. Also, the double loops of hair on top of the head and the M-shaped stylized hair on the side of the head. If you look at a lot of characters who are bald or balding on the show, they're done more traditionally. They have more of like a realistic look of how a balding person's hair would look. So Homer's the only one that has that very stylized loops of hair and the hand shape on the side. Same thing with Bart. Bart is the serrated hair shape on the top. So he's the only character that has that, other than Hugo, who is Bart's half brother, or his half brother. His brother who lives up in the air, but they never talk. But he's basically Bart's twin, so he's the only one that has that. With Bart, it's the front hairdo. With Leela, she's the only one with the ponytail hair shape, and I think she's the only Cyclops, except for maybe her parents. So sometimes that rule is broken for direct relatives of the character, but for other characters, no. The Bender is the antenna. I was designing characters on Futurama, and I did some robots that had an antenna coming up off the top of the head. And Matt said, nope, only Bender has it. So you'll have characters like Calculine, who has antenna, but they're either not in the center, or they're coming off at odd angles, or maybe they're coming out of the side of the head. But no other character has the antenna coming directly off the top of the head. Okay, now we get to color language. So that's also very important. Color. I mean, you don't have to know anything about animation to know that color is motion. There are people whose job it is to design clothing that has an emotional impact because of the color. So color language is a big important part of it. And color equals story. Again, it's the reason the word language is used is because it's telling the audience something immediately. It's giving you some backstory before anything even happens, before the character even opens their mouth. So what emotion do you get from these characters with their very yellow color language? Happy. Okay, very good. I think yellow is predominantly a happy color. Sometimes it can suggest, depending on the shade of yellow, it might suggest kind of sickness or jaundice, but that's kind of like the thing that breaks the rule. There's always something that breaks the rule. Because like they say, rules are made to be broken. But in general, overwhelmingly, yellow is a happy color. So you'll see that in happy, friendly characters. So green is a very cool character, cool color. So characters that are real chill will have greens and blues. It might also suggest their environment, where they come from. I think that's a big part of it, correct? The reason he's green. First of all, he's an ogre, so you think of ogres as maybe being green, but he comes from a swamp. So the coloring of Shrek suggests his environment, but it also suggests his character. He's very cool and chill. Same with Kermit, same with Peter Pan. Red is a dangerous color. It's a sexy color. So if you use red in your character, it can suggest those things. It can be used for villains. It's used for villains a lot, but it can also be used for heroes if a hero is very dangerous. And obviously with Jessica, reds and oranges, it suggests sex appeal. And it also may be a little danger there too. So here you can see examples of a good guy and a bad guy. And you can see in their design, not only in the shape language, but also the color language and the silhouette, how just instantly seeing these characters, you know something about them. Look at Jafar. Look at all those angles and look at the reds and the oranges. There's no way that guy is not a villain, right? And with the genie, even though the genie, like, you look at the genie's face, and if you only saw the face, you might think, oh, that could be a villain, because it's got a little bit of first of all, villains often have goatees. That's kind of like I think it's based on depictions of the devil always having a goatee, so that's something that artists use. But go beyond the face and look at the whole design of the genie and look at his coloring. And it's very friendly. It's very cool and chill. So he's like a cool, chill, friendly character. I mentioned environment. So environment can play a big part in the telling you something about the character and where they're from. So here we have 4 examples of characters who are from different environments, and you can tell the first character in the upper left. Does anyone know who that character is? Yeah? I'm not familiar, but anyway, that character comes from the desert, right? Kind of like an arid desert. Yeah? Mountains? Okay. But barren, not like a lush, foresty kind of area. So the coloring is very orange and yellow and brown. And then this character on the right, upper right, suggests like a very Arctic region that character's environment is. Lots of cool blues and whites. So, and then we've got Anakin Skywalker down here with the volcano in the background. So his coloring is designed to say something about not only evil and danger, but also part of the environment that he comes from. And then the character on the lower right, very lush, tropical kind of environment. And that's reflected in the character's clothing. So then next we'll talk about color hierarchy. So you don't want your character to be all just one color. So you want to have accents, but you want one of those colors to be predominant. So you want to have a color hierarchy that says something about the character. So with SpongeBob, the predominant color is yellow because SpongeBob's overall friendly, very approachable. So you've got these other accent colors, but you don't want red to be the predominant color. You don't want blue or brown. So with this pie chart, you can see what the hierarchy is of how those colors are used. And then palette, this is one of my favorite things of all time. All right, from just these palette swatches, I want you to tell me who these characters are. Shout it out. All right, excellent. That's why sideways, but yes, Smurfs. Sailor Moon. Exactly. What's that? Yeah, right. Good deal, right. Star Wars. Yep. Yep. Exactly. Yep. That's right. This one kind of stumps people because they don't think of it as a animated show, but those are characters. Those are characters who were designed for advertising. All right, that's one of my favorite things because it illustrates how just from seeing these rectangular shapes put together, you automatically know who that character is. And the reason why that works is because they're iconic. They're well-designed colors put together in a very well-designed, brilliant kind of way that makes you automatically recognize who those characters are. So that's it in a nutshell. That's character design. Any questions? Yes.
If one character is only on one table and not both the same characters, we all we have that like that would be
So if you have multiple characters, yeah.
But like,
Right.
what do you do?
And I think that's to do. I go already.
What do you do with multiple main characters? Well, you basically want to just make sure that they all have something distinctive that identifies them, and that no other character in the show has, or the film, or the game, or whatever it is. That's just key. It's like if you were to see a sea of Simpsons characters, and you saw only the top of Homer's head buried in that sea of characters, your eye automatically goes to him and knows that's Homer because he's the only one that's like that. If there was another character that had that same feature, even though the rest of the character was very different, it would be confusing. It wouldn't have the clarity that you want because you'd be looking at that scene going, I don't know who that is. I can see a character walking through a crowd, but I don't know if that's Homer or this other character who also has a similar hair shape. So just very important, just make sure that all your main characters have that one thing that makes them unique. Okay, yes.
Unique characters, sorry, like the comic book character, comic book guy, in the sense that this idea is kind of like what was all the character.
Yes, I did a character for Futurama. The question was, if you couldn't hear it, is there any character that I designed that was a one-off? We just thought the character would only appear in one episode, but then became a recurring character. And for me, it was in Futurama. I did a couple, but one that sticks out to me was Petunia, who, how many of you know Futurama? Okay, so there was an episode that featured this woman at a truck stop, and she's kind of like a haggard, middle-aged woman with kind of saggy breasts and a cigarette and like droopy eyes. And she's wearing a kind of a mini dress that's way too short. I see you're bringing it up on your phone, right? Yeah. So I designed her, and I only thought she would. Yeah, that's Petunia. Yeah, I only thought she would appear in that one episode, but she comes back all the time. And really, I think I'll toot my own horn and say I think it was a good design, but it wasn't a main character design. Like if I'd been drawing her to be one of the main cast of characters, probably more would have gone into it, and I also probably would have given her something more distinctive that identifies her, like we were just talking about. But I think she's a very well designed secondary or tertiary character. And they kept bringing her back, I think mainly because of the writing of the character and the voice acting. So the writers realized she's just a really funny character that they could use and bring back in a lot of different situations. Yes.
I think we were saying how do you go about making them notice if you don't have, it's part two?
That's a great question. Really good question. If you look at anime in particular, and if you look at game design, when the characters are designed to be more realistic, you'll notice their weaponry or their props are more exaggerated. So you'll have a character with like a giant machete or like a huge sword, or the sword has a very distinctive shape, or something in the costuming that is elaborate and kind of stands out. So even though the character themselves might look very much based on real life, their accoutrements are more exaggerated. So that's where you can have fun and play with costume shapes, costume design, and props. Props are a big thing. So Yeah, give a character, if you've got like kind of a very ordinary looking character, give them a huge weapon in a game. And that's gonna, and give that weapon to only that character. And then no matter where you see that character, even in silhouette, people are gonna know that's who that is. So yeah, really great question.
Is there a character feature that you enjoy, like adding here, or is it like stop yourself from adding too many characters? Like a lot of people like stars and they're like stop adding stars.
I see, like is it difficult to not go too far with the design of the character? Yeah, I think a lot of that is based on time. Like, when I was working on designing Elfo, Matt encouraged me and there were a couple of other people working on designs. This was in Disenchantment. He encouraged us to look at all kinds of things, like to make a Pinterest page and just, find examples of medieval costume and even beyond that, go into different time periods and look at avant-garde hairstyles. And so I remember my Pinterest page for Princess Bean. I had all these crazy hairstyles that were mainly from runway models, just things that normal people wouldn't do with their hair, but you'd see it on a fashion runway. So if you're given a lot of time, you can go down rabbit holes and just keep adding things and doing visual exploration. And if nobody's telling you stop, it can be easy to do that. If you're actually working on a show and you're not like developing a show for a pitch, it's not generally a problem because you don't have that much time. So you're given, the way it works on a show is the writers write a script and then they have a table read with the voice actors. So if you're part of the design team, you generally get invited to the table read and you sort of sit there on the outskirts and you you have a script and you follow along with the actors reading the script. And then there's a couple of days where the writers can rewrite, and that's actually based on laughter usually or reactions in the crowd. The people like me kind of sitting in the room, and they'll take notes. There's actually somebody there taking notes for the writers of like what lines gotta laugh or what lines gotta gasp. And they take notes and they see what's working, what's not, and then they go back and do a rewrite for a couple of days. And then they record it. And then at that point, the script, the newly revised script and the recording goes to the animation studio. And if you're a characters designer, you're given an assignment. So you'll be given like a page or two from the script. And usually the descriptions of characters in scripts is very basic. They might just say, say there's a butler named Jeeves. They might say, Jeeves, a very snooty butler in a tuxedo, enters the room. And it only gives you that much. So if you're on Futurama and that's what you get, you might go, well, is Jeeves a human? Like they didn't specify human or robot or alien or mutant. So maybe I can have some fun and do something a little different. Or you might go to your director and say, can you get a little more clarification on this? Like, am I supposed to be designing just a straight human or is it something, beyond that? And then you just kind of have fun. You can decide, is this a big stocky butler? Is it a slender, tall butler? And then just try different things. But you're only going to have a couple of days to do it. So you have to do as many drawings as you can that you think are in the ballpark. And then those get shown to the producer and then they come back to you with yes, no, maybe. I like this one, but less hair or more hair, or give this one a mustache, or, all kinds of notes like that. But then you're on to the next thing, so you don't have all that much time. Hey, anyone else? Yes?
Oh, we have like multiple characters that work as part of a team. Is it possible to make them two distinct from each other? Or is it more important?
I couldn't hear everything you said, but it sounded like you were asking. It sounded like you're asking if you have multiple characters that are part of a team, how do you make them like different, right?
It's possible to make like them to be two different.
To make them too different or too much the same?
Like two different. Is it
Too
not?
different. Well, it kind of depends on what the team is. If you look at a team like the Ninja Turtles, they're all very much the same. But they all have one thing that makes them different from the others. You look at like Power Rangers, they're pretty much all the same except for maybe their helmet design and their color. The color is the big thing that says something about that character. I don't think it's really possible to make them too different. So, look at like the Teen Titans or the Justice League or the Avengers. Those are all characters that are a team working as a unit, but they're very different from each other. I think the bigger danger is to make them too much the same. But I think the Power Rangers is a great example of characters that are very successful, who, except for the color, for the most part, are almost identical. So that's what I always say. You have rules, but they don't always work. Rules are made to be broken. Yes.
Can you speak up or do you want to come up? I'd like for the whole audience to be. Yes.
What would you say is too much of a chaotic design or too simple?
Okay, that's a good question. So what would be too chaotic a design or too simple? So like two extremes. One thing that makes a character chaotic is too much detail. If you're designing a character for animation, for one thing, it has to be easy enough to animate. So if you add too many details, it's just going to be not only confusing to the viewer, but confusing and difficult for the animators to draw. So you want a real simplicity of design. So too much detail, too many things hanging off of belts, too many things in the hair, too many ribbons or combs and things in the hair. You want to boil it down to like one thing or one or two things, just keep it simple. And then the other direction, I don't think there's as much danger in making things too simple. If you look at like Winnie the Pooh, it's just a teddy bear and a shirt with no pants. And, it's extremely simple. But it works, when you're designing a character who's really simple, a lot of what makes that character work is the shape design. And the shape design and the color. So you're not talking about detail, you're not talking about a lot of exaggeration or caricature, but just making those shapes work for you. And a lot of it is also personality, personality in the face or the attitude, the way the character. That's a whole other tutorial, but we could, if I had another day, we could get into just attitude about a character. Like when you're posing a character and doing model sheets and doing, how many of you know model sheets from animation? Okay. So, if you look at model sheets, you've got your main turnaround, which just shows you how that character looks from, usually it's a 5-point turnaround. So it shows you the character from 5 different angles. It could go beyond that and show you more angles. And then you get into pose sheets, feet and hand gestures, all kinds of things that help describe the attitude of that character. So if you have a simple character, those things can be really essential, like doing those sheets that help convey the attitude of the character beyond just what you see in the design and in the color. Anyone else? Yes.
What do you think about the idea of mixing, having multiple types of characters in like one show? Like say some characters are very cartoony, some that are very comic book like, or maybe some that are like, maybe realistic or anime. Like, what do you think about like a mix?
Again, I think the general rule is don't do it, but then there are examples of where it works. And I think it's because of these other factors that come into it that make it work. For me, like if I'm watching a show with characters that are very realistic and they introduce a very cartoony character, kind of throws me out, you know? I just don't see where the universe fits. However, I'm trying to think of one. Howard the Duck is a good example. When they introduced Howard the Duck in the early comics that he appeared in, early Marvel comics, everything was drawn very realistically, and then you had this cartoon duck with no pants. He looked like Donald Duck, but if Donald Duck was a used car salesman, and he's got a big cigar, still got no pants, but he's got a hat and a jacket. And he was very cartoony. The explanation was he came from a different universe where apes didn't evolve into humans, but ducks did. So he's the product of an evolutionary system where ducks became anthropomorphic humanoid in form. And somehow it worked, I mean, I would look at, if you just showed me, I didn't know what Howard the Duck was, and just showed me like a panel, I would go, that's stupid. Like, that can't happen. Like, you can't have a talking cartoon duck in a real world. But, look at Roger Rabbit. Who framed Roger Rabbit? They created a universe where toons and humans coexist, and it works. So, I guess my answer is, it doesn't work until it does. Anybody else? Are we at the end? I'm like not paying attention to the time. Yeah, we're after 3:00. So unless there's one more question, we'll wrap it up. That it? Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate you. You're welcome. I'm down on the floor, and if you think of any follow-up questions or just want to come out and chat, feel free. Thank you.